some feedback already going on. So first of all, what I'll do is have this conversation, and then we invite Leda and Bahia to present their work, and I will reintroduce you to the program. Thank you very much.
Speak louder.
Yes. No, it's fine. I will just speak louder. And first of all, before I open the questions to the audience and any feedback you want to ask her, or anything that you want to ask that maybe you didn't understand, because this is obviously coming from a very particular historical context, you can afterwards. So first of all, I just want to congratulate you for creating this film. For me, it was very important to see it, because it dealt with a lot of, that's why I call it unheard voices instead of unheard reflections unheard. But I think the vocabulary of this archive, of this historical context in America really, of course, parallels with what was going on at the time, and still now in the contemporary discourse, what black women have to deal with, but also indigenous women, etc. And this idea of the sort of sexism that still happen within even the black community and so on. You see it also in the many Afro diaspora, whether it's in Europe, also in Africa. And what I really appreciate about the film was how you selected some of this archive footage to create this narrative, because I think this had dealt with your own experience, your own positions, and your own encounters with these women and elsewhere, and how you're going to then create this narrative that will challenge and expose the components of the patriarchal narrative that we still have to deal with. So a lot of the things that were said by these women are talking about, this idea of castration, oppression by men, and a lot of what was dealt with really reminded me also of some of the classical works that we had. Also, I'm thinking of the black literature from the Negritude movement, that we celebrate with Césaire, for example. Even within his writing, the patriarchal narrative was very strong and very oppressing at times. So, and one of the things that also made me think about was the interview called Revolutionary Hope between James Baldwin and Audre Lorde that was done a few decades ago. So I wanted to first of all ask you about how you were able to deal with accessing this archive in the first place, because I think for me, I have very big difficulties as an artist or as a scholar to actually access historical archives in certain institutions based on what I look like or how my positional status is. So just tell us about the process of dealing with this archive.
Yeah, first of all, thank you all for coming. I just wanted to thank you all for coming. I just wanted to, you're all looking very beautiful tonight. So I appreciate that thank you. I know. I appreciate that there's a full house. Yes, just to answer your question, so the process of making this film, the archival footage, was actually the most challenging process. That was like the most challenging part of making the film. But I also, yes, I had a lot of challenges with accessing archival footage on the superficial layer. What is presented to us when you start to research historical archival footage is from usually larger institutions like Getty. That's a huge name brand of archive that's actually based in Los Angeles, where I just came from. And then there's the TV stations and everything. So I started out by looking for and accessing or trying to access footage through these institutions and these corporations. And it turned out that it was just so expensive. I mean, it's either when they did offer it for sale to a filmmaker, it would be on the low end $250 per second. That was the student rate by a public television station in Boston. Like, they should have been, they should, of all people, be doling stuff like that out for a very low price, but they were not. So yeah, when I decided that I wanted to include footage, that was a struggle, a hurdle that I had to overcome. So I really had to dig deep and find other sources of footage, and I had to also be thorough with the legal processes for what I could include in my own artwork, without getting sued. So I started researching things like fair use, and really researching legal rights for artists, and public domain footage, Creative Commons footage, really looking for footage also based around the licensees. I found my footage actually is sourced from a variety of different places, and a lot of it is public domain footage or Creative Commons. But I had to look really deep, like in archives. Like some of the footage is not even available. Like, you can't watch it online even when you see it in the archive. Like, I had to, for example, the National Archives, which is a huge historical archive that's public, that's based in Washington, D.C. You can look online and you can see some of the footage online, but some other things you just had to write down the number and the letters. So I had like a whole database of like numbers and letters, and I had to go to the archive myself to like watch through hours of the footage and get that. But I was able to get it at a low price, in some cases for free as well. There's archive.org that has a lot of public domain footage and Creative Commons footage that's specifically designed for like an open source media outlet where it's independently driven. They have a lot of stuff. And in other cases, when it was privately sourced, either I had a personal connection with the owner or the rights holder. Like the filmmaker, I would contact the filmmaker, and she, one of them would support me. If any of you know Melissa Harris Perry, she's a former American MSNBC show host. I did a screening at the university before the film was released. Like, when the film was only 20 minutes long, I just screened that at Tulane University, and I researched there, and they gave me some footage that I selected myself from there. So it was just a journey, but I'm so glad, because a lot of the footage that is out there and that is very expensive and that's, shown in your face is like, this is Angela Davis speaking at, a lot of those have already been seen. And a lot of this footage has not been seen. Why? Because you have to dig for like months to find it, or no one tells you about it. You really have to be committed to the research to find it. So even though it was less expensive, I think that I think that my process of maybe having less of a budget also shaped the whole aesthetic of the film. And so I'm very grateful for that challenge, because I think that it was just meant to be that way.
One of the very powerful things that was said during the movie towards the end was the sentence, "You can be right and fail." And I really like this, because I think this solidifies where we are now, what state we are now as groups coming together, but also dividing. And there's so many complexities about, what was raised in the film in terms of class division, of course, sexism, and privileges. And I think, I don't know, but a lot of these conversations that were raised are not really put in the main discourse, in the main public discourse. So that's why for me this idea of also disrupting, having meanings being disrupted, because what we also see is like basically a new histories that were there that a lot of people don't know. So when people don't know things, they think it doesn't exist or it's not legitimized as being historical or being something to talk about. So in terms of thinking again about narrative and the position of these women, like what was, I'm thinking your direction of how you selected this and what you wanted to say and what conversations you had with these women, what you wanted to say at the end, maybe with this sentence, but how does it reflect on your own position today as a woman and as a creative person in this process?
How does the film reflect? Or
on your own position?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So I was just saying, part of why we were actually not planning to do this segment of the event. We were just going to go into the panel discussion, and I proposed that we do a 15-minute Q&A with just me speaking on the film, because I have grown a lot since I made the film. So going off of your question, I feel like I was definitely in a very different place when I started the film. And the film actually was born from my personal experiences, just me figuring out my place in the world as a Black woman, and me processing my own experiences and where some of the oppression that I felt came from. And I had, through feminism and through these kind of discourses, I had a language to describe it, and I had a language to gain support around my experiences and understand them and empower myself. But I feel like and that also inspired, me studying these things, me reading Elaine Brown, and then creating this film out of passion. But I feel like I have grown in my own perspective of how I choose to view myself. I no longer wish to really see myself as an oppressed being anymore. Even though I understand that all of these structures exist, and that there are people in the world who are racist and who are sexist and who are all these other things, I think the evolution first, it came about from really caring about activism from the Black woman's perspective, and then I really got back into animal rights, and I got into the assisted vegan community, which is completely intersectional. We're talking about Black women, immigrants, and including animal rights and environmental racism into that. And then I completely that was the last straw, and not that it was a bad community, they're amazing, but I started seeing myself as, I started just witnessing these conversations and how, we started choosing to internalize oppression by telling ourselves that that I am oppressed, I am poor, I am this, I am on the bottom, I am the bottom of the bed. And I didn't want to apply that to myself anymore, because it didn't serve me, and it didn't serve my upliftment or the upliftment of other women around me, other Black women. That's not what I wanted to say to fellow Black women, to fellow anybody. So I started really removing myself from that and coming more into also I'm a pole dancer, and my journey with dance started right after I finished the film. And also, that's a whole another conversation. That was a whole journey. But me coming into also getting to know my body, and having a more embodied experience of myself rather than just being up here, which is the intellectual, academic, and also taking my clothes off and dancing and having people respond to that was a completely different understand. I had to really evolve through all of that, and that helped with this whole process of really being able to see myself differently and respect myself in a new kind of way that I wasn't able to before. So that's a short answer. But basically, I'm more committed now, I feel, to seeing myself and growing and cultivating myself as a whole person, really stripping away the layers of who am I beyond the color and the gender and the clothes, and who is this spirit, who is my inner being, and how can I see others in that same pure way, regardless of all the classifications and the sicknesses that people have through racism and all those other things. How can I see that? So.
Do you have any questions for her? Maybe one or two we can take before the presentations. Yes, Pia?
What was your so you worked with the sort of independent distributor Women Make Movies. What was your experience sort of both funding the film and then finding ways to distribute it?
That's a really good question. That's a good question because I feel like, you know, when I finished the film, I thought that the journey was over, and it just wasn't. When I finished the film, I made this film when I was really young. I'm still young, but like I was 22. When I made the film, oh wait, you asked about funding? Okay, funding was, first of all, just in short, because I wanted to focus more on the distribution part. Funding, I made the film on the low as an extracurricular project, like I didn't really tell people about it. I joined the film program with the concept of the film, and I made the film and used the resources that I had access to make Reflections Unheard. And that was the majority of the film. Even after, when I was an alumni, I still would go back to Boston and edit on the big computer just so I could see my film on a big computer and edit with Avid, you know? So that was like a lot of the funding was through my tuition, which was a combination of my family and loans and other things to pay tuition. Funding outside of that, I did have a fundraiser of Indiegogo. I raised maybe $1,600 something out of what I initially wanted, $20,000. But what I did was I used my tuition money. I went part-time my last semester. So I overloaded one semester, went part-time the last semester so that I would have half of my money, and I invested that into the film. That was like a big investment for me. So yeah, just access to, that's a great thing about school. And yeah, can I just say a couple words about distribution?
Yes.
So when I finished the film, I was like 22 years old, and I didn't really know anything about the film business, or I didn't know how to make money from I had people offering me, money and things like that, but I didn't know how it worked. And I wanted to distribute independently, but I wasn't exactly sure how. I was kind of just winging it and like doing the best that I could and researching. And then Women Make Movies approached me, and I already knew about them, and I was like, and they offered me a contract. And so I was really skeptical, and I thought about it a lot. And I was kind of uneasy about it because they took a really big cut of all of the sales. And, but I decided to work with them anyway. And I worked with them. They took the film, they packaged it in the DVD, whatever. They took care of everything. I didn't have to do anything in that kind of way to sell the film. And I watched the film become a best-selling film on 4 different occasions, the #1 best-selling film in Women Make Movies. And I was so happy, but I think because I hadn't taken, this is before I like needed to make money from my film. So when it came time for me to, like, I had really understood that I'm an artist, and that not just that I'm an artist, that I actually really don't do well with jobs. Like, it's not safe for me to just decide to take a job. It's unsustainable. I'm not gonna last. Something like, it's just not good. Like, I have to be an entrepreneur. I have to learn how to do this. So I watched what they did, and I decided to do the same thing that they did, was approach universities and people who would be interested. And I did that, and I didn't even know like what I could do with it, but it worked. And that was like my boat. Like, it saved my life in so many situations. It saved me. And when I realized that some people were going to Women Make Movies to buy my film instead of to me, and I really needed that money, and they were taking thousands of dollars, and they wouldn't give me a higher percentage. They were still giving me the small percentage even though I did the work. That's when there was like a long thing about, this was just last year. That's why it's good that you asked now, because I've never said this to people, because it was never like that. Like, it was never like that. But I decided to cut ties with them, and that was one of the best decisions. But unless I had actually taken ownership of my work in a business sense, I never would have even seen it. I never even would have seen it. I would have just been kind of like unhappy with it. But yes, I just wanted to say that it's important for artists to take ownership of our work, have business skills, and really like understand how to work with our art.
Thank you so much.
Wait,
yeah?
Can I take one?
One question? Yes,
yeah.
okay.
Hi.
Yes.
It's just a curiosity. What's the dialogue of these women?
Yeah.
First, congratulations for your movie.
Thank you.
And the new generations.
Mm-hmm.
Are they in dialogue, or what these women doing now? That was just a curiosity.
What are they doing now, the women in the film?
Yes.
Well, this was all very recent. So many of them, I found them, I would contact them just by Googling them, like Google stalking. And I would find them, actually, a lot of them are working as professors. Some of them are either professors, some are working as, even the ones who are not featured, but who I found anyway. Some of them are authors, professors, they're working artists. Like, I know Deborah Singletary, the one with the doll. She's really interesting. I'm still actually like kind of in touch with her because she lives in New York. She is a astrologist, and like she does work with like, around spirituality and the moon and everything. And she's also an artist. So I love her. She's like my auntie. But yeah, her and yeah, I think that I can't. Oh, I mean, Cola Booth. I know she's a writer. I'm not really sure what she's doing, but yeah, a lot of them are very reachable in that sense because their names were listed on some university website or what they're doing professionally. But some people, I don't really know what they're doing, like the two Black Panther women, because they reached out to me, so I don't really know what they're doing now. But yeah, a lot of them are.
The dialogue with the new generations.
And the dialogue with the new generations.
Now, how do you think their experiences connect with us now?
Well, even on a practical or organizational level, we were wondering in the brain, like, because there is a danger of seeing that as a past and closed chapter, which it is not. I mean, so many of the issues, of course, that were raised are, still very much pressing. So are they still kind of organized in a way to also share their experiences, you know, beyond, of course, an important movie like that, but also on like organizational level?
Yeah. I don't really think too much about how they connect with modern day experience. I think our activism, the way that we mobilize these days is very different. I mean, it's like social media, a lot of stuff happens online. There's a lot of different channels, new channels to really get the word out that didn't exist before. And so I just see our time as being different, but of course, like, we can always borrow from those old conversations. I don't really see us talking about the same issues in that regard. But this also, like, is from my perspective. I think that I've been a bit removed from some of those conversations for a little while, just so that I can, like, really take care of myself. Yeah. Gosh, that's a loaded question. No, I like loaded questions. Yeah, I'm not really sure. I'd have to chew on that for a while. But I don't know. I guess that maybe some of you guys saw some parallels as to how it relates to today, you know.
Well, I guess it's something we can talk about in the panel discussion towards
Yeah.
the end. Then we have like more time to digest,
Yeah.
because obviously, I mean, there's so much to say and so much to ask. But also for you to also think about how you want to, you know,
Yeah.
like answer, because it takes time.
Yeah.
Some time to reflect on it. So I want to thank you very much.
Thank
Please
you.
give another round of applause to So if you don't leave now, you don't disappear, you just stay on the chair. because I
Oh,
want
really?
to say yeah.
Okay.
So-
I'm here.
What I want to do now is I want to start with the presentations. I want to invite Bahia to show your work, what you're doing. So I just want to say a few words just to introduce on. Yes, okay. I mean, she will show somewhere you can sit there if you want. It's no problem. So, no, this idea, I think, so with this edition of this exercise and this series was to really think about the politics of also organization and solidarity and resistance. So in this exercise, we want to focus on not just the politics of the body and how it transmits its messages through practice, yeah? But thinking about what happens in times of revolution. When is the time for revolution, and what happens to these discourses of alliances and resistance? So this is where, so we started with this film of looking at the archive footage, and now we want to invite Bahia. So I have to give the form, as the introduction. So Bahia, she will present some of her work that she contextualizes as resisting the white cube, which is on the struggle for women's rights that came to the forefront during the Egyptian uprising. But Egypt was not new to feminist discourse. Huda Sha'arawi founded the Egyptian Feminist Union in 1923. Consequently, Egyptian women have enjoyed more privileges than any Arab women of different nationalities. The fight has been continuous. What the revolution did was share more light on already existing problems. Currently, the walls of Cairo have been whitewashed. All memories of the revolution have been erased. Artists of dissent have either faced prosecution or fled the country. Those who stayed are forced to keep quiet. The difficulty now is in navigating safe spaces of expression. As a woman street artist, and after experiencing the freedom of painting on the street, going back to the white cube is a challenge. So her talk will discuss her artistic project concerning women's issues between 2011 to 2018 on the street and in the White Cube. Bahia, she's an associate professor of practice of design and founder of the graphic design program at the American University of Cairo, where she has developed a full design curriculum mainly focused on visual culture of the Arab world. She has taught over 14 courses on the topic. Her artwork has been on display in exhibitions, galleries, in the streets internationally, and has received a number of international recognitions and awards. Her book, 1,000 Times No, The Visual History of Lam Alif, was published in 2010. I would also like to share that Bahia for me is like a ray of sunshine. She is a mother of 2 beautiful daughters. And yes, and now I will just give you the floor. So a round of applause.
Well, thank you for joining us today, and thank you, Sally, for the invitation. Is it possible to dim the lights a bit?
Yes.
So, my whole journey started in 2010 when a curator came and told me, we need you to produce an, you can't hear me, we have a microphone. I'm not great, we don't. I don't want to raise my voice, I'm not great with screaming, but I will try. Or you can move forward from the back. Yeah, you can, let's huddle, let's huddle. Let's huddle, this is an intimate meeting. So actually the exhibition was here in Germany at the Haus der Kunst in Munich. And it was commemorating 100 years of Islamic art in Europe. And in the event of that exhibition, they invited young Arab artists to participate. And the curator told me, do whatever you want, but it has to be with the Arabic script. We don't care what you do. And in 2010, as a human being, as a woman, but more so as a human being, I felt like I wanted to say no. And in Arabic, to say no, we say no and 1,000 times no. So I started looking for the shape of the letter no on everything produced on Arab or Islamic, under Arab or Islamic patronage from Spain to China. And I collected my findings in a book, documenting who drew this letter, where it was drawn, what was the material it was drawn on, and the date when it was drawn. And to I was quite afraid, to be honest, because I didn't think I would find 1,000 no's. After a year's work, I had to stop at 1,000. So that was the exciting part. So this is the installation that went on display. And to me, it was very empowering to stand next to 1,000 letters that say no, as a little woman standing in front of that big curtain. It wasn't only a reflection of the richness of the Arabic language, but also this is only the shape of the letters. Can you imagine the philosophy, the history, the knowledge that all these manuscripts shared? So it was very empowering. The revolution started when the artwork came down, and for 9 months I was only documenting as a historian. I didn't want to engage. And then 9 months into the revolution, video plays of these men being stacked like garbage in Tahrir Square. And at that point, something happened for me, and I felt like it was maybe time for me to be active and stop playing historian, because I had seen over 9 months everything that was going on, having documented aggressively. So I took one no and I added a message to it. No to military rule. And I started spraying this in Tahrir Square. Suddenly the no's became my ammunition, and I started reacting to the different events that were unfolding, and every no I added a message to it. So no to emergency law,
no to military trials, no to a new pharaoh, no to stealing the revolution, no to bullets, no to snipers, no to bullets, no to tear gas, no to sectarian division, no to violence, no to killing, no to burning books, no to stripping the people, no to barrier walls. And I started spraying these no's over and over again on the streets of Cairo. But that, having said no over a year, wasn't enough. I felt like there were other things that we needed to be saying, so I created several campaigns. I'll be sharing a few of them with you. This was called There Were People Who Have Been Blinded So That You Can See. There were people who have been stripped naked so that you can live decently. There were people who have been killed so that you can live. There were people who have been imprisoned so that you can be free. There were people who have had their head put to the ground so that you can raise your head up high. And the interesting dynamic for me at the point was how the information was being shared during the revolution. So something is online and then it erased. This was erased quite quickly. It went viral, but then what's more interesting is that it was featured in a newspaper on the first page or the third page. So to me, the message has surpassed the medium. It didn't matter that you are on the street, or because the time of the message was right, it traveled across mediums. Another incident happened when 52 children were killed on a bus in Asyut. To me, it was another failure of the government, but also for us as human beings. And the sound bites that were being shared online of these children that were killed were extremely disturbing to me as a mother, because it was the first time where we see the mothers crying, but then you are bombarded with the information of the children. And suddenly I read the list of their names, and to me that I felt like this is something that I want to work with. So this is Tahrir Square, this is the Ministry of Interior, where all these were barrier walls were roadblocks, so protesters couldn't access the ministry. And this is the wall that had my nose on it. And this was 2012. I went to the wall in 2013, and the wall was still there. And a group of activists had painted another message on the wall over my artwork. They did a beautiful campaign. They went to all the murals on all the barrier walls, and they painted the street perspective, and they pretended that the walls were not there. And they got a band, and they sang, and they danced. But even though they did that, the walls were still there. And so I started painting these children, the 51 children with their names on their backpacks, and they're talking to each other. So they're playing hide and seek. So the first one is saying, Khalawis, can we come out? The second one says, Lissa, not yet. So has the revolution succeeded? Not yet. Did we get the rights of the martyrs? Not yet. Has Egypt become heaven on earth? Not yet. So I kept painting these children with their dreams and their hopes for a different Egypt, each of them with their backpacks still going to school. I also painted a series of them with empty dreams so that passers-by would fill them in. This is a different project. It will take a long time for me to say, but a very interesting dynamic happened when these bubbles started filling up, and then eventually the whole artwork was erased. Another two projects that are related to women was this one, which is Rebel Cat. This was a very iconic wall that was covered repeatedly, and every time it gets covered, we would go back down and paint on it. So it was like a conversation taking place on the streets of Cairo between the rebels and those who are pro-authority. So the tank was painted, and then someone else went and covered the military man. So it was a whole interesting give and take. So eventually the whole wall was erased. and a lot of artists went down and painted. For me, I wanted to paint a rebel. So a rebel cat, a cat or utta in Arabic is also a way to call. If you want to call at a woman, you can also call her utta or a cat. So rebel cat was painted, and the story of when it was painted was interesting because there's another street artist who does these paste-ups of faceless women on the streets in Cairo, and I wanted to salute her work, but while I was working we were chased by two men who took our spray cans and actually vandalized her work with my spray cans. So it was very interesting times in Cairo. So the last artwork is Maja Correa. I'll be sharing this one with you from Cairo. This was the last thing I sprayed. So during the revolution, there were aggressive sexual harassment against women specifically to get us off the street, and there were organized techniques, circles of violence that where a group of men would surround women and rape them and pretend that they are protecting them while they are beating them up and raping them. So, and they were calling for women to get off the street because of this. So it was an excuse to tell women to stay away. But then a woman is also, according to certain extremist groups, is called aura, so something that should be covered. Her voice should be quiet or muted. Her hair should be covered. Her body is aura. So I created another intervention that says Mukhak aura, your brain should be covered. And I painted these women because to me this is what was the problem. And of course they had to tear it away, so you're left with an empty brain, which also serves the message. Your brain is empty, your Mukhak aura. So this is what the walls of Cairo look like right now. And so again, Germany always plays a nice part in my life. In 2015, I was invited to Freiburg to paint, and I thought maybe, okay, I haven't been on the street for 2 years. I can't paint in Cairo. Maybe I'll just take my stencils and go to Freiburg. And there was the anti-Islamic wave going all over Europe, and I said, okay, maybe we need to do something less specific to my locality and more international and human, which was the main purpose of the 1,000 Times No. So I started again a new series of no to extremism, no to racism, no to blood, no to war, no to fascism, no to borders, no to discrimination, no to hatred, no to killing, no to stupidity. There's so much of that now. No to colonialism, no to violence. And I started spraying these in different cities around the world. The logic was, if I can't be in Cairo, if Cairo is no longer, if I can't paint in Cairo, then the cities of the world are my cities, and I will paint everywhere. So I started painting the no. This was in Freiburg, in New Orleans, this was in Vancouver, and in Istanbul. But then I felt like I've had enough saying no, maybe I need to say something else. And poetry always comes to my aid in a situation like this. So I took the poetry of the Palestinian poet Mahmoud Darwish, and I started working with his poetry on different walls in different cities around the world. So the first stanza I painted was stand at the corner of a dream and fight. And this started, I'm still working on this series. This was in New York for the imprisoned women, for the imprisoned butterflies. And this was in Madison, No to the Impossible. This is in Marrakesh, We Love Life If We Had Access to It. This is all poetry by the same poet. Also free Arabic from its classical representation. So I'm a form of writing Arabic, but it's also a way to create awareness about the richness and in Tokyo, I painted On This Earth There Are Things Worth Living For. In Kefalonia, it was for the people who were drowning at sea, and this was painted at a place where Olympians were training in the next to their pool. So those who have no land have no sea. This was painted in Beirut. My country is not a suitcase. And this was in Amsterdam. We were invited and the road. I wanted to end the This was in Norway. It reads, it's a stanza, but I only the last two parts. So how wide is the revolution? How narrow is the journey? And then the one in big is how big is the idea? And next to the man there in very small, how small is the state? So this was in Paris. I Will Dream. And I just finished painting a wall in Berlin, but we didn't put a slide.
It's there, but
Maybe I put, maybe I've opened the wrong file. I'll share with you. It's the first time I use women as letters, and the new message for Berlin is this was in line with our theme. Happy Berlin, we finish it tomorrow, but I will preview now. On the street, in Angola, I paint, but also the people I get, because I'm not commissioned these big festivals, I simply ask, and enough. So it makes you vulnerable as an artist, and it reminds you of your need of others, and it helps you. It puts you to the test being on the street, because you're open to criticism of people, because that's why are you painting here? It's really interesting. It really kills your ego. You're not in a gallery protected by your entourage, but also work because obviously it's a different kind of audience. It's a place where I get to reflect pace, because on the street you need to be fast. Not because only of time constraints or visiting the city, but the weather is very tricky. It can rain, it can be too hot. Too hot is very good for the paint, by the way, so it's fine if it's too hot. When it rains is the problem. So this was an artwork that I created last year, where I tried to reflect on something that happened to me in 2011. I broke my knee and I was bedridden for 3 months. And during these 3 months, my mother flew over and stayed to nurse me and take care of my daughters. And every morning she would go down to the garden and pick some flowers and put them in a small vase next to my bed, because I couldn't move. And this simple act of collecting a little bit of flowers and putting them next to my bed, I started taking photos of these flowers because I had a phone. I had nothing better to do. So, and then for almost 4 years, I was obsessively documenting flowers because of that morning. And then what do? You create a project out of that, of course. So I selected 77 flowers from different parts of the Arab world, and I created screens of, I abstracted them. So it's a book I'm working on publishing soon, the 77, so it's called the Chronicles of Flowers. And with each flower, I wrote my memory of this flower, where the first time I saw this flower and what's my memory with it. Because I grew up in Lebanon, and the Lebanon flowers are very important. We drink them, we dry them, we wear them, we gift them. So I had to reflect on all this process of the flowers, but then having grown up during the Civil War, all of my memories of flowers were also linked to the war. So it was a very interesting memoir to write, but also to exhibit. I created a multi-sensory experience installation, so where I created 3 videos of footage of my mother, my daughters, and the flowers. So I picked a flower for each one and created a screen. So it's more of a multi-sensory experience reflection on that event for me. And the second project that I want to share about women today, and which is hopefully going to be exhibited later this year in London, is about the Light and Hope Blind Women Orchestra. So I created a short video on this all-women blind orchestra that doesn't need a conductor at all. So they play without a conductor because they're blind. They can't see the conductor. So it's just a short art film, but for me, bringing the story of these women, this is the bottom of the food chain. You're blind and you live in Egypt. And still they play amazing music. It's wonderful, and they've toured the world already, but you rarely hear about them. So I wanted to bring their story to a bigger audience. And finally, I want to share one last audio artwork that I created in 2015 for the Louisiana Museum in Denmark. So again, we were invited to reflect on the Arab world, and I created an installation. I painted 22 minarets on the walls, but to me, what was more important than reflecting politically and socially on the architecture of the minarets, which is a long story for another day, and the height of the minaret and the shape of the minaret, etc., etc. To me, who's familiar with I don't know if you're familiar with the Islamic call to prayer, when they stand on top of the minaret and they call for people to pray. So for 1,400 years, the call to prayer is raised by men, because women's voice is awra. So I decided to record the call to prayer using the voice of a mezzo-soprano from the Cairo Opera House. So you will hear it now. It's for, if you would like to close your eyes to enjoy it better, you're more than welcome to do so. Let's see if it plays. Oh, let's hope it plays. Okay, we don't have the file, so. Maybe we can access your email.
What? Is it as you sent it to? Is what you sent earlier, no?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Maybe
It's
on
this one?
This one, I think. This here. Voilà.
Mm-hmm. But if it's not there, then they can hear it online.
Let's try.
It's fine. If it's not, I think we should have embedded it. Yeah, we should have embedded. They can hear it online. It's fine.
Okay.
Okay, so you can hear it online. You just Google my name and write call for prayer. You'll find it. Okay, thank you.
The picture is actually here, but I
Yes,
cannot.
here's the Berlin
But
one.
why is it look? Bah voilà.
So this is the new Berlin one. Wait, it's still work in progress, but
And what does it mean?
this one, yeah, it reads "Glory to the Resistance," but all the letters are shaped out of women's bodies. Okay.
Yeah, she just finished it today, so I'm so proud of you. Thank you so much. I want to invite now Leda Martins, and then we'll continue with the discussion and questions. So I just put up your presentation. Also have to introduce Leda. Okay, so actually Leda, she was guest of ours 2 years ago as part of the incantations programs that we had in 2016. So when we first moved into this space, she was invited by the Goethe Institute also. So Leda, she's a professor of literature, arts and science at the Universidade Federal de Minas Gerais. And other forms of diasporic worship that participate in the transmission of Afro-Brazilian memory and identity. Her books include Afrografias da Memória. In 2000, Leda Martins was visiting scholar in performance studies at New York University. So, voilà, I give you the floor when it's all ready. So welcome.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good. First of all, I want to thank you, the organizers, the curators, Natalie, Elena, Frederica, the curators, also Peter, Karen, Kellen, Lima, and all the people who made possible my coming this time. Thank you all. Thank you all for the nice invitation. I'm very glad to be here. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You are all very kind. Thank you all. Thank you all to be here. I'm very glad, and the two other presentations were so beautiful. And you see, when I was watching the movie, I was thinking how we have some common experiences, right? In terms of our existence as women, and as black women. And my talk will be maybe a little bit diverse from the other ones. I don't know if you know Brazil, but Brazil has one of the most rate in the violence against women, particularly in the feminicídio, the killing of women. I think you are in the top of the world. I brought some data, but I forgot them at the hotel. So you have to trust me. It's unbelievable. The number of women that are killed every day, every minute in Brazil. And the last years, the numbers have come up, increased, and with some interesting data. It has decreased among white women. It has increased in general, but among white women it was decreased. It was increased very much about black women. This one fact. Now I'm going to narrate to you an anecdote, but it's a true story. Some years ago, me and some colleagues, also professors of the university, we went to Rio de Janeiro to a conference. So in one of the nights, we went to the theater to see a play. So when we came back, we were there in the hall of the hotel. We were around 4 men and around 6 women talking about the play. So, at a certain point, many of us asked for the key to go back to the room. But me, because my colleague, I was sharing a room, she was in the room already, so I didn't have to get the key. So we went up. When we were up in the corridor of the apartments, one of the men was called downstairs. They came after him, and he was called downstairs. So we all came down with him because we didn't know why he was calling. Then the man told him that at that hotel, they didn't allow to get prostitute to the room. Whom do you think they thought was the prostitute? Myself. I was the only black woman among the group. So the man at the front door, since I didn't ask for the key, thought I was a prostitute that one of the professors was bringing with the hotel. Why? He didn't. You see, two other of my colleagues also didn't ask for the key. Why? I was the only one that considered to be a prostitute. Well, but this is part of the history of Brazil, of black Brazilian women all over our history. It's very interesting because in Brazil, we did have, since the end of the 19th century, a kind of politics of the nation. In the United States, you know that they never agreed or were in favor of miscegenation, right? So one of the goals of the United States as a nation was to get rid of the black people, even to see if it was possible to send them back to Africa. Even a country was created in order to fulfill that goal. In Brazil, we already had a lot of miscegenation. So it was not possible because the number of the black population was already very great. So the politicians in Brazil, and that's documented with the historical documents, was to whitening the country. To whitening the country, it's a politic. They even gave some period of time for Brazil to be white. So in this kind of politics, first of all, Brazil would improve the immigration from certain countries, as German, Italian, white countries. Not Portuguese, not Spanish. Remember that in Portugal also they have the Mouros, right? And also in Spanish. And also, for a certain period, they would stimulate the marriage of the black men with white women, but not the marriage of the white man with the black women, thinking that also was one way of whitening the country. So I usually say that Brazil has created maybe one of the more efficient racist system of discrimination. Because first of all, the goal is even today, even it's not said, is whiten the nation. And that kind of concept, it's built even in the minds of black people. So it is very common. It is very common in Brazil. Even within the black family, to valorize the whiters, or the one that has the lighter skins, and the phenotype that's whiter, and to discriminate the ones that have what is the blacker phenotype. And also, okay, within this kind of politics, it's interesting also how are the images of the black people in Brazil. Even though Brazil is known to have a racial democracy, that's a lie. It doesn't exist. And that was even an international politics of Brazil, to stress in other countries. And even today, many people would deny that there is racism in Brazil. They would say, no, 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 we all live so well together. We don't have this racism in Brazil. What we have is economic differences, social and economic difference. But then, you see, in social realms, and also in the arts, usually we have some images that portray black people, black men, and particularly in our case, black women. Let's talk only about black women. One of the most powerful images, and that's not only in the arts, but is socially, is the black women, particularly, usually the image has a kind of distinction. The mulata, and also, let's see, the one with the tone of the skin darker. The mulata, usually, but also, not only the mulata, usually all the black women are thought or visualized in Brazil has the synonym of lasciviousness, over eroticism, good to bed and to kitchen, unliability, untruthfulness, lack of decency, a man's eater, almost an animal, good for sex relations, but never to constitute a family. So, there is no surprise the man in the hotel would think I was a prostitute. You see, this is so strong in Brazilian society that usually we black women are invisible. They never see us in our individuality. Usually they see the image they have inscribed so deep inside the social system. And that's very interesting because along the Brazilian history in the arts, be it in literature or in theater or more recently in films and in TV narratives, this kind of women, the black women, usually has no family, no husband or children. Usually, she's not a mother, not a friend, never a wife. Usually, what she is a hidden lover. Her only power, her capacity to mislead, to seduce, to betray. Sex, her only tool. And her destiny, death. It is interesting because in the movie, someone was talking also about the other type that's very common in Brazil, the mummy. Even today, in the TV narratives, what is the mummy? Is the housekeeper? Usually, even in theater or in cinema or in TV, the female character would appear as a housekeeper, a babysitter, a mummy. The black, what is called in Brazil, a mãe de leite, the milk mother, the one that was supposed in the past and even in sometimes in the present to take care of the white man's children. And also, these women are depicted as very ignorant, as if they had no empire, no, how to say, brain, right? They are very friendly, almost as a dog. They don't have personal thoughts. They don't have goals, family, history, love affairs, sexual desires, her destiny, disappearance. And you see, by the beginning of the 80s, just after Christmas, one image started in Brazilian TV. It's called Globeleza. The image is not very good because I took it from a global site. And you see, I don't know if you can see, she's nude, she's naked, and her body is painted. And this Globeleza, let's see the next one. How do I do here? Let's see, like this. You see, for more than 15 or 20 years, it was the same girl. And then they start changing. But each year, just after Christmas, she appears. It's the Globeleza. You see, the way the black woman is figurated, the way she dances, her way her body is showed, just comes to encounter the image Brazil have of the black women, an object for sex. And also I brought one other very interesting image. This was a movie made in the late 70s with Zezé Mota. Zezé Mota is one of the greatest Brazilian actresses, the one I gave you the CD. This was her first movie and was a complete success, not only in Brazil, but all over the world. She was playing Chica da Silva. Chica da Silva is a historical figure. But as Cleopatra, they transform her image of a very intelligent woman in a prostitute. So in the movie, you see again the only tool Chica da Silva had was her over-sexual desire. And it was interesting because every time she was going to catch a man in the movie, she would do some kind of gritos as a monkey. Some kind of, how do I say gritos? Screams as a monkey. And you see, let me show you some more of the image. Here. Here. And what is very interesting is that one day I was with Zezemote, years after that, in a round table, and people was asking her, what? First, why did she do the movie? And what, at that moment, it was few years after, many years after, she thinks about it. She said that when she did the movie, she didn't have maybe a conscience as she had after. But even though she tried to see what she could do, but there was no way to do many things with the what was stressed in the movie. So what it's interesting is that what has been done by us women in order to at least challenge those figurations, those social images in Brazil. Again, in Brazil, we have faced with all the differences, the Brazilian context, we have faced maybe the same as the United States. The politics of feminism usually didn't, particularly in Brazil, didn't include the black women, particularly in Brazil. So, and along our history, we had some women that would stress the needs, because in a scale in Brazil, you would have the white man, then the white woman, then the black man, then the black women. If you talk only about these two kinds of ethnicity. So, since many years ago, but particularly after the dictatorship, this is also something to stress in the case of Brazil. From 1964 to 1984, we lived under a military dictatorship. So during 20 years, we were not supposed to raise any topics that would say, no, Brasilia is not a beautiful society. See, you could not, the military dictatorship silenced or tried to silence everybody. I don't know if you are aware about that. It was one of the more horrible period in our histories. So during these 20 years, many of the social movements had a lot of difficulties to put any goals to struggle for. So particularly after the military regime in the late 80s, in the beginning of the 90s, all these kinds of movements restarted very strongly in Brazil. And also, I decided to pick up to show you, particularly in two kinds of locus of movement. One, very briefly, in literature, in poetry. First of all, there was a movement in the universities to enlighten, to put some light in the writings and knowledge created by literary female in general. So you had a lot of professors trying to describe Brazilian literature, putting to our views the literature written by women. And part of this movement stressed their eyes to the black writers. So that was very important as a politic to see inside the universities some people not only studying the women writers, but particularly few parts of them enlarging the vision to take some Brazilian black writers. So it was very important then, the university criticism, to light writing of black female writers in time, diachronically, and also in order to write Brazilian literary history, enlarging the canonical references, including black female writers, because usually Brazilian literature would not include the black male writers, neither the black female writers. Or when the writer was very important, or is very important, was very, very common to whiten his face. For instance, Machado de Assis. Machado de Assis is considered to be one of the most brilliant writers of the 19th century, not only in Brazil. But you see, they would figure Machado de Assis as a white man. Only recently, we black people are urging to give back the blackness to Machado de Assis. But then, there were also some black writers that were even read internationally, but not in Brazil. One example is Carolina de Jesus. Carolina de Jesus has her books published in more than 40 languages, and she was not read in Brazil. Okay, so what was important for these generations of writers, particularly the generations as myself that was writing by the beginning of the 90s, the end of the 80s, the beginning of the 90s, it was underlying visibility to the black women, showing not whom were these women, but how were the writings. So one thing that was very interesting was that this is one of our best writers, Miriam Alves. I made an interview with her in 1995, and Miriam was saying the racism of the white against the black, the sexism of the men against women are similar. In general, the tendency of the black writer is to engage herself in the struggles of the men, because the struggles of the men are called to be general. Then the specificity of being a woman writer is not perceived. And then she gets on saying, I don't need to be talking about Shibata. Shibata was something that they were used to beat the black people during slavery. I don't need to write about slavery, to write black literature. Art is liberty. My art is engaged with myself. I am what? I am a black woman, a mother, a single mother. I am a businesswoman. I am a daughter. I am an activist. If I am not able to speak in a short story, then I will speak in a poem. If I'm not able to speak in a poem, then I will speak in a novel. If I'm not able to speak in a novel, then I will speak in a romance. If I'm not able to write any kind of this, who knows, maybe quadrinhos is this kind of, I'm sorry, I don't know the translation in English. Those are my instruments. Literature is my tool. If I'm able to communicate myself, put only comments in the paper, and the reader understand that I'm speaking about this place, Brazil, the miserability of the black population, if I am able to speak with comments, I'm going to fulfill the paper with common. And Miriam was very interesting because she was part of a collective, a black group that was created by the end of the 80s called Quilomboji, a Quilombo Hoje, that had one of his goals to fight against racism in Brazil and to make it visible, the literature made by black people. By then, later on in the interview, she would say that when people were discussing strategies or things like that, the black men would never pay attention what the black women had to say. That's very interesting because it repeats what was said in the movie. So, one of the politics of the writers of the late 80s and the beginning of the 90s was to embody the body. To engender the body has a politics of empowering the female writer. This is a politics that I call the politics of corporeity. By means of performances, the writers would address her own body, unlashing the old images, problematizing it, rewriting it, performing it with the gaze, the ear, and the agenda of blackness, posing new epistemologies to address the expectation of black women and their proposals. Self-diction, self-expression, self-demands. To rebuild the body is to build a new history, is to make visible and audible the women as subject of their own discourse and achievements, not always similar and close to those of black men, neither to those of white women and their feminist politics that usually in Brazil exclude black women. Building partnerships, collective alliance, aiming to create and to build new practices in many scenarios, in scenarios of home, social, and political, to be able to challenge the system of exclusion and misrepresentations in many places as possible. And that's very interesting because one of the strategies of the writers is to create groups in the periphery of the towns. So today is unbelievable the number of groups of writers that gets together in groups in the periphery of Brazil. Then art then becomes one of many tools for these challenges. So many spaces for creative and collective experimentations have been tried mainly in the periphery of towns, and some are very successful. One example, 2 years ago, the woman most voted for the city council in Belo Horizonte was a black woman, Áurea Carolina. In Rio, the most voted for the city council was Marielle, that unfortunately was killed 3 months ago. I don't know if you heard about that. And then one of the things that the writings of these women would try to stress, first, reappropriation of language. Also, stressing new strategies to stress the necessity for women's solidarities, building collective sisterhoods, voicing, and that's very important, female demands and needs, and highlighting issues that has to do with social class, economic differences, political absence. Brazil is one country with mainly we don't have women in political offices. So, decolonize the mind, to remember here, tongue, in Brazil, requires at least a double movement. In relation to Western theories and concepts about black people in general and about women in particular, more particular still to black women. And also to decolonize our own minds from the internalized concepts about ourselves. What means decolonize the Western knowledge in all its spaces and to free ourselves from their power deeply inscribed within us, in our subjectivity. And then, this is a question and a struggle even against black men. If you think, I brought some pieces of some poems. Can you read Portuguese? No? You see, Natalie told me that I could bring those in Portuguese. Now you help me. You see? Let's try just a straight translation. Night doesn't get asleep in the eyes of women. The female moon, similar to us. Em vigília, help me, Natalie.
Yes, I don't know vigília.
In vigília is when we don't sleep.
Vigil.
In vigilance?
Vigil in English?
Yes, vigilance. Takes care of our memory. You see, it's as a poet, I am a poet, Natalie didn't say that, as a poet, I know that translate poetry is very difficult, right? But you see, just for you to sense, I'm going to read, I want you just to listen. A noite não adormece nos olhos das mulheres. A lua fêmea, semelhante nossa, em vigília atenta vigia a nossa memória. See, one word that's very important, memory. One of the traces of the poetry of this early 90s, the 90s, would be to stress the importance of memory. And the women as someone that is as a griot, has the right and the tools to say it again, but in her ways. This is a very beautiful poem, because most of the time, what she is doing, I'm going to read it again. Na curva do rio trilha a imagem, poesia sem margem. Dos braços jorram vertentes da criação. A natureza olho navega, pelos destroços no íntimo cheira vida. No leito o corpo se unta de verso e prosa. One thing that also is brought by these poems are the body. The body as a place of the creation of epistemology, of a new knowledge about the black women. And this also is very nice. Uma gota de leite me escorre entre os seios, uma mancha de sangue me enfeita entre as pernas. Meia palavra mordida me foge da boca. Vagos desejos insinuam esperanças. You see here, you have the drop of milk running in between the breasts of the female body, a drop of blood in between her legs, and also half a word that she masks, that is trying to run away or to come out of her mouth. And then she says that vague desires insinuate some hopes. And also, I'm not talking about all the poems, but in this poem, what is very interesting, the first of all, the I, women, one of the strategies of the black writer is to use the I and to make contours and curves with the eyes along the poem in order to be owner of their own voices. Well, and those also mainly the same. Wow! So, one of the things that we may stress is that in all these poems, unfortunately, I didn't have the translations, the signifiers, voice, body, memories, are the links that tries to redesign the black women body as an alternative, as an écriture, as a scripture. So, the language, it's a language that's trying to be a language as if she was born in that precise moment. The language that was used to write about us, it's not good anymore. We women have to recreate language. This is a kind of inaugural gesture in terms of writing. And all these women, we are going to have this kind of thing. And then the body, it's also a geography. It's a locus. And then as a geography, it's the women that is trying to design a new cartography. A cartography that is social, economic, political, where the women is not just a maquillage, but she is someone that's important. Okay, this kind of the movement we are going to see also in the performances. And just to end, you see many groups have been created all over Brazil, and in the last years, in the last 10 years, particularly groups of white performers. Be then a group as the Crespos. That's very interesting because one of the politics of the Crespos and of some of these groups is to occupy many places in Brazil, Brazilian towns. This is São Paulo. São Paulo, you know, is one of the biggest towns in the world. So, what the Crespos do, they do street performances. I was reading to Bahia, I was listening to Bahia. It's very interesting because in a way what she was doing with the graffitis in all the towns, she goes in different parts of the town, that was the same kind of graffitis the Crespos means wants to do. Particularly, that's very interesting because the group, now they have maybe 10 persons in it, and only 2 men. Most of them are white men. Again, here you have the Crespos also, in one of the performances. This was one of their most interesting performances because they put in the stage the history of one of the books of Carolina de Jesus, the writer I told you about. Here then again, with different kinds of performing. This is another group, the group from Bahia, the Bando de Teatro Olodum, and this is one another kind of strategy that they use too. So one thing that it's very interesting, the group of black women, the performative groups, is what I call the dramaturgy of the visual dramaturgies, where the visual images are very strong. And also, you have the dramaturgy of visuality, the dramaturgy of spatiality, the dramaturgy of light, and the dramaturgy of sounds. Those are dramaturgies or plays that experiment with technology. What is very interesting, because usually people do not associate black people with technology. And it's very interesting to see, as in the Brazilian black theater, particularly the theater done by women, but not only, the use of technology has been huge. 2 minutes? Okay, so then, what I have been stressed in my work is also how to read those kinds of dramatic realizations. First of all, the body as canvas. I'm not going to talk about it, maybe later on I can explain. The body as canvas. The body as a body of adereços. What I mean is that that's also what I have been stressing in my studies about blackness is that we are used with one kind of inscription, the alphabetical one, right? The letter. What I've been saying is that there are other ways of inscribing knowledge, and one of them is through the body. The body movement, gestures, dance, but also painting in the body. Those are all ways of inscribing knowledge. And those are ways that usually the female black plays, performances in Brazil have been using. Another kind, and that's what I called Afrography of the bodies. How to graph, how to, as hieroglyphs, making the body a channel also to inscribe all kinds of memories. And then another thing in my 2 minutes that's very interesting is the way that women, not only women, but particularly the women, are going back to some kind of religious background, particularly the candomblé, has one way of empowering themselves. What do they bring? Candomblé, it's a place where women are very strong. So usually these groups, they don't represent the candomblé on the stage, but they have candomblé as one of the references. So, see? You know what I mean when I say this, the body has a canvas? Where by many ways we rewrite knowledge, we rewrite what we do think about us. And also, just to finish, I'm also calling this kind of perspective as a griot body. A body that gives testimony to the history of black women. Thinking history not only as the past, but as the present and also as the vir. The vir, there is no way I think to the vir in English to translate the word. In this sense, the body is a body that is also a repertoire. And now, here is Grace Passot in a play that was here in Berlin called Preto. Didn't know if you had the opportunity to see it. And that was a very strong image because you had one thing that happens in Brazil also is the genocide of the young black men. 8% of the killing of men in Brazil is of blacks, men from 9. So that because in the play you have a Pietà, and also have that black actress deconstruct the image of the globalizer. She came to the room, she came to the stage, she addresses the audience and says, I'm going to sing for you. I'm going to dance for you. And then she freezes. And after certain seconds she says, I'm not going to dance for you. I'm not going to sing for you. And to end, this Marielle that was killed 3 months ago. An activist, a black woman, lesbian. Thank you.
Thank you, Leda, for this talk. introduction, so we have lots more to talk about. I just would like to invite you, Baia and Leslie, back at the front, so we can take the questions from the audience as well. Can I get the lights? Through language, knowing that language is also something that's the body that is speaking. So, Baia, you want to start?
Yeah, I would love to actually. Thank you for the question. I think I see a lot of commonalities actually, other than the theme of women, but also more importantly the concept of memory. And
The concept of what?
the concept of memory.
Memory, yes.
So, and this is something that unites our work or our discussions, our thoughts in a way on how do you reflect on memory, how do you also shape it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think our work involves this process of shaping memory. At least I speak for myself, but also I think also for others. The line from the film that resonated with me a lot, and we were talking about it when the film was concluded.
You can be right and film.
And that really resonated because after the revolution, it's very it resonates because this is actually where we are right now. We feel that we were right, but we have failed. So. In that sense, that echoes, but also the order of women. I mean, you mentioned black women, white man, white woman, black man, black woman, but also it's the same for Arab women. It's a similar hierarchy.
Yes.
It's a similar order, and I see it with other nationalities
Yes.
being. I think it's all over the global south.
Mm-hmm.
It's not limited to Brazil
it's
or the Arab world. So, in that sense, these are the highlights that I saw between the three works.
Nevlin?
Can you repeat the question?
Basically, in relation to what you see, how you think that discussing, creating these memories and archives and these narratives Like where do we stand now, like in terms of how do we make ourselves, how do we make this history reappear in that way? And I was asking about maybe your visions about, or your, how do you say, the way you would see how memory is being spoken through the body.
Well, I personally feel like that's more of what I do in my current work, which, I mean, this was one of my first projects, but my current work is very much me at the center and my body as a performance artist, and I model and everything, and I write my personal stories, and I write memoir. So I'm speaking of my own history and my own experiences and giving voice to myself and giving voice to my body as well. So that's me as part of the new generation. That's how I see myself, as being part of that. Yeah.
Okay.
But that was not really shown as much. That's just the very first thing that I thought of, is what I'm currently doing.
No, because I guess you're dealing with material first with this movie, in reflection to what was then where you were at, because obviously this is a work that you did, years ago, that you say that you are in another space now, and you find your own form of performativity that was going to create new perceptions and new dimensions for you to work with. And I think, for example, with the work of Bahia, it's really working with the space of the city, of these voices unheard, but it's like different bodies, and this is a kind of strategy to work with, whether it's in archive film material or working with visuals in the streets, or what Leda highlights is to do with performativity and how to redefine. She talks about this idea of creating the eye with curves and contours, which is about also the sort of creolization, breaking down and reinventing and reforming the language of who we are.
Yeah, that's so complex. I feel like also sometimes there's a way of describing things that sometimes feels very academic, and the way that was described sounds so much like that. And for me, I've tried not to do that as much, because it doesn't really feel quite as accessible, or doesn't really sit the same way in my body. It kind of feels like it's like a lot of words to describe an experience that's not really fully my own. But yeah.
And Leda, you want to?
You see, there was something very interesting in the movie. Did you pay attention the way the women dressed themselves in all the parades?
Yes.
That was very interesting, because usually, as they said, they were underemployed, right? Or unemployed. They didn't have a lot of money, right? But then they decide to show very elegant bodies. That's very interesting. That's a way to describe history and to describe yourself in history. You see, you are not this kind of people you think we are. We are this one that we decide to show. And have you paid attention? They are all very elegant. And that's very interesting, because that's a politic also. To choose to create. When I talk about the body is body, and also is a corpus, and a corpora, right? And what I also think that in the three works, I think that we do have a lot in common. Because most of the time I was looking as the women in the movie were describing themselves in certain ways in your movie. And this doesn't have to be with one generation or the other generation. Even the way you dress yourself, you are describing knowledge. See? Yes, isn't she? That's what I mean, you see? You are, and also, when Bahia, it's very interesting your name, because it's the name of a state in Brazil. Bahia, when you go after all these letters, right, that means no, you see, you are bringing to us an archive that was sleeping. You are giving him light, giving it life, another kind of life. See, you writing memory. That I think the same thing I was trying to stress in my presentation. Also, one thing that, as Bahia has said, I talk about white in the scale and the pyramid of power, because in Brazil it would be like whites, blacks, the indigenous people, right? That I didn't talk. In your, there would be the Arabic women. We all talk about the same thing, power and trauma, right?
Yes.
We're talking about the same thing, power and trauma. And if you don't, not to die of trauma, you have to transform it in life. That's why it was, the whole work is just wonderful. It's just wonderful. Wonderful, because in the images, when she puts the no, when she puts the new letter besides the dead bodies or the traumatized bodies, but you see, she doesn't like them die. They still are alive because she recreates them. She gives them life. That's wonderful. That's what we all are talking about. How to get things that were apparently dead and make it be in movement again. Thank you very much for both of you.
Thank you.
Do you have any questions, pressing questions from the audience? Yes.
No,
What
You
about
guys
the
are like
yes,
so
yes.
great.
no, so I went to run to
stayed
see the
through-
play, the football play.
So
If you don't have any questions, we go to see Croatia and England. If you don't have any question, right?
Yes,
Please.
please.
It's not fully formed as a question, but I think in your work, and in what you were talking about, the body of the artist who's working, the body of the protester, the body of the person who's trying to reinscribe knowledge, how do they transcend time and space, I guess? Like, how do you reach people who are not immediately with you if you are a performer? Does that translate across, I guess, a photograph as well? Or do you have to be present to experience that? And similarly, does the body of a protester on the street mean the same thing as a protester online? So, I guess just digital presence or cross-media presence versus corporeal presence. And what do you think about that?
Can you ask again?
It's an it's a two-part question, so you can
Yes.
ask the two questions again, so that.
Okay. So for a woman of color who is, say, trying to rewrite how we think about knowledge through her body, as a performer. In order to understand that language, in order to understand that moment, do you have to witness it in real time, in the moment of a performance, or do photographs of the performance, or descriptions of the performance, reviews, so basically talking about that performance in different media, does that, how does that translation work from the body, talking about the body in image, or talking about the body in language? And the question about protesting, I think for both of you, is what is the difference between a protester on the street and a protester, I guess, online? And since a lot of that activism also happened online now, what does it mean to be a woman of color, online versus on the street?
I would like to answer your first question, if you don't mind, and then give your second one a try. I think what we realized during the revolution is that ideas are relevant to those who can relate to them. So there was when we were demonstrating on the street, there was a lot of talk about younger generation being influenced by external money and funding to go down and protest. But actually, if you were on the street, they were all ages. And they were old women, old men, young women, young men. So I think your question about what impacts, what made me go to the street is a video, is an image. And what made millions of people go down and demonstrate was also images and sounds and chants that we shared with each other and stories, so memory. Yes. So this is what made us go down to the street. So it really doesn't matter the medium. I was in New York watching a show by an African American artist, and I stood in the middle of the gallery and I cried, because her work spoke to me at a very deep level. So it really doesn't matter the medium. What matters is who's receiving it. What matters is who's your audience. So I think that partly answers the second part of your question. I think it's a dialogue. For us during the revolution, we would see something online, we go on the street, somebody takes a photo of what we're doing on the street, they would share it online, and then other people would come to the street. So it was like a cycle. And I think all knowledge now is a cycle, and sometimes, like you said, the books I was researching to find the no's, some of them haven't touched them in the library archives for like 40 years. So it really depends on who's looking for this, who wants this knowledge. I hope that partially answers your question.
And also, you see, that's interesting because nowadays, particularly, everybody stresses the power of the medias, right? All different, particularly the social medias. Even the Primavera, they say, oh, it was very influenced by the social media. But you see how interesting. When they created the photograph, some people said, well, the painting is going to disappear, right? It didn't. And then when the cinema was created, they said the photography is going to disappear. It didn't. When the TV came, they said, wow, then now the cinema is going to die. And also is the social media. Because you see, Natalie and the curators I came from Brazil. It's very, very far away. See? I'm just trembling about that 8 hours to go back. 8 hours to go back. But she should have, she could choose to make by video conference. Right?
Yeah.
It would be cheaper. But the experience wouldn't be the same. See, the alive experience is something that you still will maintain. And that is very important. As the social medias are important, the reception of being together, of exchanging things. So you can look at me, I can look at you, eye by eye, I can see how you sit, I can read your bodies, you can read my body, right? We can exchange our subjectivities. It's one way that you see a word that I use, a very archaic word, griot. Griot would take us back centuries ago. Those in certain, I'm using it in a more general way, but those in Africa, in certain countries and societies, that were in charge to communicate, to translate the history and the memory of the community. What puts people together? What creates identity? Can you see something as beautiful as this? We are from different parts of the world, right? For few moments, in being together, in doing this kind of exchange, we are able to cross what usually the frontiers don't permit us to do. That's why, for instance, I almost cry with some of the images. But I'm telling you, if I could, I would go to see by myself each one of them. And also for us, black descendants, African descendants, that's very important. Because the oral performances, that's one way of inscribing knowledge by oral performances, what I call myself oralitura, putting together many things in that word as a concept, right? That is a way that more and more, because think about one thing, great way to speak is very interesting, to create a new era. Person with the computer, right? Or with the cellular. That's why I think it's very interesting when someone asks me to come from Brazil to bring it Bahia French Excerpt to be together. This kind of repeating the experience of togetherness, it's a political act, ideological act, and a performative act to put our humanity together. And if you think the scenarios you have today, walls in Mexican border with the United States, Trump separating mothers and children, the immigrants that die on the oceans trying to come to Europe. And Europe is image and a dream, right? And for some, they will even have the right to dream. You see, everything today is to separate us. Everything is due to separate everybody and each other and everybody, right? So, thank you very much, Natalie.
You came, so
The experience of being together, togetherness, that the performance gives to us. Because performance is an act like this, is a performance, right? There are different types of performances. This is one kind of performances. And the performances, it never repeats itself the same. If you do this again, few hours from now, it will be different, of course. And it's this that has something that it's the same, but also has something that's different. That's very interesting. And I think that's why the aliveness of performance. And what also is interesting, that I found very interesting, the way Bahia do that with her work. You know, her work claims to us to go to see it, to be with it. That's what performance is, right? That's why she said how important it is, the reception. I didn't answer you, like curves.
You answered curves and contours. Very good.
Contours.
Any more questions or feedback? It doesn't have to be a question. What you saw, how you feel, what does it mean for you? What's the position in this?
You all look like my students now.
I just wanted to say, like, sometimes people, like, they don't want to come, they have a question, but they don't want to come forward with it because they don't think that they sound smart enough. And, like, in this space, I noticed that we're using, like, a lot of big words, which is what kind of what I was saying before about the academic language is very inaccessible to a lot of people. Even if you have had that background, like, I went to college, that's all I had to sift through. It was horrible. So I'm just saying that if anybody, it was horrible. I don't like it. So I'm saying that, like, if you have a question, I mean, for me, I'm speaking for myself, I'm an open book. If there's something that's, like, off the wall that you want to ask that might seem kind of, I don't know, like off kilter, then just ask it because it's all relevant. It's all relevant.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Most men hear and see feminism as a bad word. And like when I work or I'm with other people, when the word comes up, that's what they see. That's the image. The first image is a black one. It's like, we don't like you. We here don't like those there. So is there a space or an effort that's being done to like educate us, the men? Because not all of us are aware of what's happening, you know, because I think I see feminism differently as most feminists. Because people think women are supposed to be under, and I'm a Christian. And the first thing people need to understand is that the woman is very strong. That's what I tell everyone. So that's why God says, you submit. He didn't tell the man to submit, he said, woman, submit, because I know who you are. And that's why he was made, says, I will make you to help your husband. You are a helpmeet to your husband. You are so powerful that he will not do what I have asked him to do without you. So that's how I see feminism. The woman is not a weak person. They're so smart because they go to work, they come home, they cook, take care of the kid. I mean, I'm a husband, so I know. And on top of that, they will come and take care of you, the husband. But we still tend to see them as, oh, they bicker, and it's like, is there an effort to help some men understand that, hey, this feminism is not what you think. Let's sit, let's talk, and just see where we come from. Yeah.
I would answer. We are still debating, and feminism is a very big word, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
And there are many ways to look at feminism itself. So you walk into maybe you're saying that it was labeled as a bad word now. So maybe this is something that was actively worked towards to repress women again and make them serve men again. So there was the big movements of the 70s, and then all this was burn your bras, which is what the movie said none of that will happen, but this is something sensational for the media. So with that portrayal of the media, the media played a very powerful part in demonizing the feminists and help create this image of them again. I think men understand women are, but if you have a privilege, why would you want to give it up? This is the question. So, I think it's the role of the mothers to educate their sons, the teachers to educate their students. It's a social effort. It's not something that one person can go and bang a drum and say, "Oh, feminism, feminists are great." Mm-hmm. It's the group of a community and the whole society. So, okay.
Yeah. Well, just to give some insight, yeah, there are efforts to educate men. I've seen in America, where I just came from, a lot of, there have been some groups of black men coming together and, speaking amongst themselves of what the thing is that I think that this society and the way that we're conditioned, it's not just about women. I think men are cheated out of, being in touch with their own highest selves as well. When they don't see women properly, they also don't see themselves properly, and that is that causes a host of problems, That's why men are conditioned to be more violent. I mean, men, have testosterone and everything, blah, blah, blah. But, I've seen actually groups of men forming groups of consciousness to speak amongst themselves of what actually they can do to be allies to women, and to be better men in society and to themselves, and to also have emotional support amongst themselves, which is huge. My brother just passed away. You made me think about him. Yeah, he was a black man, and he suffered a lot emotionally. He had mental illness that he never told anybody about. And I think that a big part of this was he wasn't supposed to cry, or he wasn't open about his emotions, which caused a lot of illness, and I think that also this is one of the damaging things that this does to men in a very personal and intimate way. I think that a lot of men, and I'm always also thinking about black men, are coming together to talk about these things, and in a way that's also very revolutionary in its own way. So hopefully we see more of that coming together here, but I'm new here, so yeah.
We are not born men, women, black, white, Egyptian, Brazilian. We become this. It's a susto. I think I'm suffering a jet lag. Today I just was. But you see, have you thought about the child when he or she discovered that suddenly that she's a woman, and then she's supposed to act like this? She's not supposed to do something that her brother can do, right? And also, in our religions, unfortunately, we talk about the narratives. when I read the Bible the first time, I was in shock. In shock, right? Because you are going to excuse me, we're not talking about the God. Let's talk about the narrative. Women and nothing is the same. Okay, but then, I'm not academic, I'm just curious. Since very little, I like to read. That's one of my pleasures in life, to read, and read. And I love reading. I'm full of curiosity. And I'm an artist also, so that's why when someone said about the academic, I said, well, I'm an artist. I'm a writer. I am a dramaturgist. I'm a playwright. I was an actress. So I'm an artist too. But you see, then, when you let's read the Christian Bible and the Torah. But also go and read the other books of other religions. They only read the Odyssey, right? Read the other narratives. All the narratives we have are patriarchal narratives, right? They talk about power. We, as women, doesn't mean anything at all in these narratives. So it's a shock for any child when he discovers that he is a man, so he's supposed to act like this. And she is a woman, she's supposed to act like this. And the narratives we have just reinforce that. And it's not only one narrative. You see, when you read the narratives that are the foundations of all the civilizations, be them African, Egypt, the better one are the Egyptian one. The old,
Yes, of course.
Old
Women
Egyptians
were
one. The old Egyptian
the
one.
ancient Egyptians, mythology and
Yes.
the practices.
Yes, and where it seems the women had some kind of power and some kind of credit in the society. But even there, one of the most powerful queen that decided to become a pharaoh and to be respected, she had to use the beard, right? She had to dress herself, hatshepsut, right? She had to dress herself as a man to be able to be pharaoh. I love her because she decided, I'm going to be pharaoh, not a queen. A pharaoh, right? I don't want to be a queen. I want to be a pharaoh. But then, when she had portraits, that's very interesting. To be respected, or to stress her position as pharaoh, she had to use the man's beard.
Last comments, maybe?
Yeah, just a relatively short question about that. So yeah, thanks for that. This has been really wholesome, and thanks Nisha for inviting me out. She's the reason why I'm here, and I know I'm embarrassing you, but this is great. But I just wanted to ask, what's the greatest support that you need right now in your life? Or just in general?
What's the greatest support?
Yeah, what's the greatest form of support that you need right now? If that's you.
I would like to answer. Should I go first? I always go first, so I might as well. So give them time to reflect. I don't feel like I need any support. I would like to see more networks of women, and I would like to see more communication between women that can empower each other. To me, that would be the reward. 80% of my students are actually women, and I take pride in that.
Mhm.
So I don't feel like I'm doing what I love to do in life. So I feel I'm one of the very lucky few. But what I feel we need as women right now is to talk to each other and help each other out. Because no one else is going to do it. So if we don't support each other, no one's going to lose the privilege they have. So you have to work your way towards it, and that only happens by collaborations and networking and support. So if you're a woman in a leading position, support younger women, help them, guide them, and help them build their career, because sometimes the enemies of women are women themselves.
Yes.
So to me, that would be my reward. This is what I want from. If you're asking me what do you want, this is what I want. Okay.
Yeah, the word that comes to mind for me is space. Space, time, money. I feel like when I really think about it, though, I mean, there's like the two main things that I've really been challenged with in my own practice for the past few years is space. I mean, of course, it's connected to those other things, right? It's always like connected to money and all those things too, but like the space thing for me is like very like multifaceted, because like as I mentioned, but I don't know if you were here, but I mentioned before that I'm a pole dancer, and I've had like such a journey of I've been training myself for years, and I've had a journey with like venturing into studio spaces and not always really feeling welcome, like fully welcome. Like, yeah, you're welcome, like you're a customer, you're paying us, you know, or like, you know, like, but like seen, like feeling really like seen, like to me, it's like after all that I've invested, then I see myself. And so it's weird for me to go into a space where I don't feel seen. It's like, why are you not picking me up right now? You know, but then when I exit those spaces, I see like, okay, that wasn't for me to begin with. So now I'm in a place where and this is also part of me, you know, coming here, it was like, I've been on this journey of really creating my own space. Like I'm very, and I think that that's been consistent with me, as I've always been really like, I've always had to blaze my own trail. Like I've always had to create my own lane and then drive in it, you know, with my own car that I created myself. Okay, so like that's the journey that I'm on now, and I feel like the biggest thing for me is space, so that I can really create my vision and my visions, because I have so many. That's like a big support, and then also being able to access the right set of resources and or like networks, but also like the audience that I feel like really like who I can have that special kind of exchange with, who really sees me. But that all has to do with me like actually just being authentic. I think that that's the biggest thing for me. Yeah. Thanks for asking.
Thanks for
Wow.
answering.
That's a cat. I'm a cat.
Wow. You see, I am the oldest one here. And maybe I am already in a moment of my life that I have received so much in my personal life in the last years because of some familiar tragedies. You see, my son was killed with 27 years old. So he was part of that statistic I gave to you. And it was for a mother, when you saw the Pietà in the picture I showed you, for a mother, this is a pain, there is no way to get rid of it. So what I have been experiencing in these last 2 years, it's very recent, it's all the support I needed to stay alive. And that has been for me a kind of anima to try to see if this stops in Brazil. The indices of assassinations in Brazil are so horrible, so horrible. And when it's possible to give a small phrase about that, you have to spread the word, right? Spread the word and to fight against it. Because I'm not the only mother that had the son killed. Many millions of Brazilians are killed each year. The country also, again, as it has happened in other countries, we are going in a hole with the new politics that are coming. The extreme right wings probably will win the elections in October. You see where in all the social and political policies of the last years are all going, have been turned apart. So I particularly am a poet. It's hard time for poets. It's a hard time for poets. You see, as I was saying that I have doing something in music, in cinema, in theater that I direct, I write, but I say that basically I'm a poet. And the support maybe that the answer is that we need some poetry in this world. Support the poets. You see, because it's an art that's almost nobody thinks about it. What it means to be a poet? It's a word that has no poetry anymore. You are in an era of narratives, right? Prose and narratives. And maybe we need some more poetry. But as a poet, the poetry needs very little. It is as the flowers in the desert. Maybe only a drop of water is enough.
Well, thank you. On that note, I'm gonna pack it up because it's a lot.
Thank you.
And I want to thank you all three of you for your generosity and for being able to have this conversation and answer these questions. So, big round of applause for you. Such good attention to these wonderful women. Also want to thank you for your presence and for the support. And I really want to thank also my team at Savvy who actually made this possible, made this encounter, this performativity possible. And this is work that is constantly being done. So I really want for you to give a round of applause to them because without your support, we're not able to do this. Yes, so we still have some drinks in the bar if you want last-minute drinks. Is there still food left over? Some kind of? Yes, so if you're actually hungry, we can give you some food as well from earlier. And yes, thank you very much, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I hope to see you more and see more of your work.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for everything.
Two of them, and then
And thank you for this year. Natalie gave me.
Yes, I get